CRM was supposed to improve customer relationships. Instead, it's shorthand for can't resolve much. Which means you may have sunk a fortune into software that just bounces customer issues around but never actually solves them. On the ServiceNow AI platform, CRM stands for something better. With AI built into one platform, customers aren't mired in endless loops of automated indifference. They get what they need, when they need it. Bad CRM was then. This is ServiceNow.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg,
Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia,
and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is Let the Record Show. With me in the studio is Governor David Paterson, the former governor of the state of New York, a member of the state senate, indeed the minority leaders.
Who we missed desperately in Albany.
Oh,
thank
you. God knows.
I think
also
I'll
Lieutenant Governor. Also Lieutenant Governor, and he's with us in the studio. Also in the studio is Eric Lavine, noted commentator, attorney, and essayist. And with us is also the co-host of this great show, Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the county chair of the Suffolk Party. So, gentlemen, not since the founding fathers created this great constitutional republic have you had so much brains in one room at the same time.
Since Jefferson dined alone.
That's since Jefferson dined alone.
I say that, and I'm on the phone line. Thank you.
Not since Jefferson was on the phone line with Adams. All right. So, all three of us will take turns speaking on this show. I want to begin with UN Week. Now, what does UN Week do? Other than being disruptive...
Causes traffic.
Right. Other being disruptive to the traffic flow in Manhattan, having overpriced hotel rooms, restaurants, and causing absolute havoc with the traffic tickets, they have caused absolute chaos in Western civilization and the world order. And the idea that all these nation states are rallying to recognize a Palestinian state while hostages are still being held, while Hamas is still waging war against the state of Israel, and somehow this is Israel's fault, just makes my eyes bleed and my head explode. And that leaders of countries like Spain, Portugal, France, England,
Canada,
Australia are rallying behind this, to me, gentlemen, I submit respectfully, is legitimizing the use of terrorists and terrorist tactics against a sovereign state and saying, if you do it long enough and tough enough and you hold out, you'll win, you get your own state. So I say to all those people of all those nation states that are so busy trying to marginalize, isolate, and demonize the state of Israel, be careful about what's in your back world. Because back in your world, in Spain you have people who want to leave. In England you have people who want to leave. In France you have colonies that want to leave. All across the world you have people who want to break off. How about Quebec getting out of Canada and having its own country? So, let me begin with my good friend, Governor Paterson. What are your thoughts, Governor?
I think that the silence of countries that consider themselves free is exploding. I don't know why there seems to be this don't attack anybody who is attacking Israel issue occurs. And, you know, the funny thing is, Your Honor, particularly this hour in the morning, there really isn't that much to say about it. It's outrageous. And I think we should take pause to notice what they've done and act on it. And I'm thinking about President Trump, who certainly has the capacity to cut off some of the help we've given those countries, which we've been giving for years.
And Eric, what are your thoughts?
Oh, my thoughts on this. I could go on for hours.
Please do.
Look,
No, everybody gets a turn. No, don't encourage him, Governor. Don't encourage him.
So it's a perfect example of Occam's razor. You know, the simplest explanation is really what covers this. President Macron's approval ratings are somewhere between 17 and 21%. 10% of France's population is Muslim. Less than 1% of France's population is Jewish. In the UK, Keir Starmer's approval rating is roughly around 23%. Roughly 7% of UK's population is Muslim. Less than 0.5% is Jewish. And this runs across the board in all the countries we have mentioned. These are craven political leaders who are wildly unpopular, are virtually irrelevant domestically in their countries, and are fighting for relevance. And they're hoping to appease and appeal to the Muslim voter at the expense of the Jew, first of all, because they're in such small numbers. And secondly, nobody ever worries that the Jewish community is going to riot if somebody goes against their interests. Worst that happens is the Jews will just leave. But in certain circumstances amongst radical Islam, you have to worry not they're going to be riots. I mean, in France, for decades, there have been no-go zones in France in Muslim areas where they're trying to institute Sharia law. But so that's really what's driving this. And the reason why it makes perfect sense that that's what's driving it is because the creation of a Palestinian state and recognition of a Palestinian state is, to put it quite mildly, stupid. It's inane, it's insane, it's self-destructive. It also operates from the false premise that the Palestinians want a two-state solution. They have zero interest in a two-state solution, and they proved that in 1948. They proved it in 2000, 2005, and 2008. In each case, Israel said yes to a Palestinian state, two-state solution, and each time the Arabs and the Palestinians said no because it requires them to recognize the right of a Jewish state to live in peace within internationally recognized borders. The Palestinians want their own state, but they want only one state with no Jews or a subjugated Jewish minority. So it operates from the false premise that the Palestinians want two states. But part of the problem is that now in Israel, after October 7th, there's absolutely no appetite whatsoever for a Palestinian state. There was before, but there is not now, except across the political spectrum, unless, of course, maybe on the radical fringe left. But but what does the Palestinian state do? Just think of it. Even if they were to try to have a Palestinian state, it has no borders. It has no recognizable borders. It has no government. Let's assume you can figure out what the borders are, which I can't imagine how. Who's going to rule it? The French and their co-surrender monkeys keep saying, "Oh, a reformed Palestinian Authority." The Palestinian Authority has absolutely no credibility amongst the Palestinian people. It's a kleptocracy. Mahmoud Abbas is in the 20th year of his 4-year term, and that's because if he were to hold elections, Hamas would win. So there are two options. You can either hold elections in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza, in which case Hamas will win. So the mantra of no Hamas can have a role in a post Israeli victory in Gaza is nonsense because Hamas will win the election. Or the alternative is that some outside force will impose a leadership on top of the Palestinians, in which case they will have absolutely no credibility. So either way, this is doomed to failure from its beginning. But now let's assume you can solve those problems, which you can't. But this is where you get to the point that it is absolutely inimical to American and Western civilization's interest. So let's assume you establish this state. One of the characteristics of a state is that you get to make treaties with other countries. Well, who's this new state, the Palestinian state, going to make treaties with? China, Russia, Iran, North Korea? So in other words, what we will succeed in doing is allowing the Palestinians to have a state to bring into the heart of the Middle East some of America's biggest enemies who pose a great threat to the American-led world order and Western civilization. This is what the French and the British and the Australians and the Spanish, this is what they want to achieve. You know, the whole thing is absolutely crazy. So Israel and the United States, we have succeeded in pushing out our enemies. Iran is neutered. Hezbollah is basically neutered in Lebanon. Hamas is on the cusp of extinction. Israel is winning everywhere. Israel is expanding its power everywhere. American interests are being advanced everywhere in the Middle East. And now, lo and behold, all of a sudden, our closest allies in the world are coming up with this great plan to undo the whole thing. It makes no sense. And it can only be explained by domestic politics in each of these European countries.
So, Jesse, first I want to congratulate you on being reelected once again as the county chair of Suffolk Party. It's the 5th time.
Bravo.
You're a great leader of the Republican Party. You're a great leader not only out on Long Island, but in the entire state of New York and across the country. And we wish you well for your next 2-year term. So, Jesse,
Thank you.
I just want to ask you this. The UN situation is bigger than the Israeli question or the Palestinian question. Mm-hmm. It's about the UN itself. What are your thoughts about that?
It's a pleasure to be here, and Your Honor, thank you for those kind words, and Eric as well. And Governor, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, thank you, Jesse.
I know you're a Yankee fan, so that's good.
No, I'm a Mets fan.
Yeah, this is why we miss him in Albany.
I had you. We had it there. Jesus.
You walked into it, Jesse. What can I tell you?
I did. But anyway, but seriously, from a Republican, you were the last decent governor this state had. I do thank you for that public service and your continued service.
Thank you.
But in speaking of what Judge Weinberg just asked, I think we've all touched upon it, and maybe what we need to do is just speak to it in the very blunt and direct terms that President Trump did when he addressed the UN on Tuesday, and that the UN is a feckless organization. It's lost its way. It's a bastion of anti-Semitism. It's a United Nations of organization of radicalism. It's been ineffective. It's corrupt. There have been a history of bribery charges, food programs that have been abused, harassment, sexual harassment charges. Honestly, as a New Yorker and a Long Islander, and as an American, I agree with Jerry Cassar, the state conservative leader. It's time for the UN to go. Go find one of these countries that that are anti-Semitic and anti-American, and where they have no free speech, and it's truly a totalitarianism type of government, and place your flag there, because it's been ineffective in these last several decades, if you really think about it. And I just want to touch upon President Trump's speech. And as I said, it's a speech that maybe you've never heard, or maybe has not been heard in a very, very long time, if ever, on the international stage. It was very direct. It was very blunt. He gave a message of concern to these countries about their open borders and how they're losing their own nationalism and their own patriotism and their own societies. And of course, that any type of independence requires you to be energy independent, and that solely relying on renewable energies for the full stack of power is not going to work. I just think it was important in that one moment. And, you can disagree with his approach, our president, but you can't disagree with his examination, his assertions of what the UN is now and how it's failed. The fact that, like it or not, on the international side, or to those countries that feel that the UN is the be-all and end-all, and it's really a be-all and end-all failure, is that it was the Trump administration that ended 7 conflicts and wars. And what I found crazy, and I found really disappointing, but expected, is when he said never once did the UN get involved to try and be part of the solution. It never picked up the phone to call these nations that were in conflict. It never picked up the phone to ask the United States how they could help to end this conflict in these different regions. It just demonstrated that it's an insiders, all boys, club of anti-Semites and people who hate the American way, freedom and liberty. And I think it needed someone like President Trump and others to state that, because our allies are slipping away because of the very thing the president said. And let me just speak to Europe for a moment, because we've said it on the show a number of times. The EU, with its open borders, has allowed for the society, the traditions, the nationalism of those European countries to be overrun by Sharia law. Now they're proposing Sharia law to be the governing law in London. That can't happen. And I think that the president was direct, blunt, articulate, and very insightful when he says of his concern and love for the European countries and our European allies, that they better change they've got to change their ways. They've got to address these two things immediately, or else they won't have a nation. and their nationalism and their traditions and their own societies will be overrun.
Well, we have to take a break. We'll be right back. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist and attorney Eric Lavine, our very special guest, Governor David Paterson. We'll be right back with more interesting and important conversation. Please stay with us.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg,
Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia, and
essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party and the vice chair of the state party. Noted commentator and essayist Eric Lavine. Governor David Paterson, the former governor of the state of New York, chairman of the state Democratic Party, lieutenant governor of the state, and minority leader of the state Senate, is with us in the studio, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Switching gears to another important foreign policy issue, Trump starts off the campaign and he says he's going to solve the Ukraine-Russian problem within 24 to 48 hours. He knows how to make the deal. Well, I think we're all a little bit disappointed about that promise and that expectation that he's going to make the deal. I think, frankly, it's now become recognized that it's delusionary to believe that Putin can be trusted at all and that he actually wants peace with the Ukraine. I think, if anything, and I said this months and months ago when the event happened at the White House, we had Trump and Vance jumping all over Zelensky. I thought that was bad politics. I thought that only emboldened Putin. If you have a problem, you do it behind closed doors. And as the governor knows and Jesse knows, being political leaders, you cut your deal behind the scenes. You walk out when the cameras are rolling to shake hands and to smile. You don't argue on camera before a live audience across the world. That emboldened Putin. Putin has only gotten worse. He goes and he has his meeting with Trump. Trump laid out the red carpet. That was swell. Treat him with respect, even though he's a war criminal, even though he's kidnapped kids. He's killed tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and his own citizens. He's totally dominated by the thought of restoring hegemony over Eastern Europe by the Russian Empire. So this is a serious, serious problem. And what do we do now? Eric.
Well, I think in fairness to Donald Trump, when he was making his statements regarding bringing peace to the region, I think politically he was within the Republican Party. There's this isolationist wing that's against the United States projecting power abroad or getting themselves involved in foreign altercations. And I think as somewhat of a nod to them, he didn't want to antagonize Putin. But I happen to agree with you. I think it's a mistake, and the only way that we're going to ever get this thing resolved is we're going to have to start flooding the Ukrainians with as many weapons as they need, as quickly as they need, and without putting limitations on their use. And I think, President Trump has said that he's prepared to use tariffs and secondary sanctions. And to his credit, he is making sure that the Europeans go along by making the Europeans go first by not buying any more energy or limiting the amount of energy that they buy from the Russians.
After all, the Europeans are subsidizing his war effort.
Yeah, exactly. So why should we be imposing these tariffs and sending all this money to Ukraine if we're going to limit their ability to succeed because Europe is paying for the Russian war machine to fight them? So if the Europeans are wedded to a Ukrainian victory, as I think they are, or at least they claim they are, and a Russian defeat, I think that it's perfectly reasonable for the president, to ask for that. But, I think what puts the finer point on why Putin can't be trusted, to the extent that we needed any reminding, is he's testing us, and by us I mean NATO, including the United States, by flying drones and having overflights into Ukraine by going over NATO countries like Poland, Romania, and the Baltics in an effort to test whether, what our response is going to be to that. And fortunately, the response has been swift and aggressive. The president is recently on record, President Trump is recently on record as saying that he would defend Poland to the extent there was any doubt that there was any limitations on the Americans abiding by Article 5 in the event one of our NATO allies asked for it. So I think we're to the point now where Putin is going to be put to his pace, is going to be put to test. I am hopeful that the president will get far more aggressive with Mr. Putin, and I think that will send a very, very, very important message to China about Taiwan. The president has been very successful in sending a message to both Russia and Taiwan by attacking Iran and their nuclear facilities. So I think this would just be the next step. We can't separate out the Taiwan theater from the Ukrainian theater from the Middle East. They're all the same war. It's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea putting together their new axis of evil in an effort to undermine and defeat the American-led world order. And the best way for the American-led world order to be undermined is for the United States not to respond. It's for the United States to sit back and let events just take their own direction. We need to take control of our own destiny. We need to start making sure that countries are deterred and are afraid of the American deterrence effect. And that's why the attack on Iran was so important. And I think we have another opportunity now with Russia economically. It doesn't require committing any troops, but economically to put Russia in a box.
Governor, your thoughts?
I think this is a situation that's going to continue for a long period of time. I actually had a question for all of you on the panel. When Trump was speaking in front of the UN the other night, I almost thought that he was going to intimate that the United States would secede from the UN.
Well, that'd be okay. That'd be okay with me. We should surely start defunding it. I mean, Mamdani wants to defund the police, but we should certainly start defunding United Nations. Some of these crazy organizations, the Human Rights Commission. Iran sits on the Human Rights Commission. Israel can't sit on it. So the whole thing is crazy. I think it is time for the United States to ratchet back dramatically our financial contributions. I think we donate something like 60% of its budget, some insane percentage. But that has to stop.
Jesse, your thoughts?
Number one, I think we should eliminate the last 60% of the budget there. And in fact, it's interesting, just to go back to the president's speech, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but in the London Times, there was a report about career staffers at the UN saying that there may be a message given to the American president where they ran out of money and things were not going to be working properly. And lo and behold, the escalator did not work.
Teleprompter?
When the president was on it. The teleprompter went down. And then the audio feed to the press and the dignitaries was different when President Trump spoke as opposed to other world leaders. But just to pick up on the point that Eric said, every action the United States takes in any theater is a message to China directly, and of course that axis of evil we've talked about, North Korea, Iran, and China and Russia. The president got to where he got. I think that deep down in his heart, he does not want to engage. He has seen 20-year wars and American lives lost with boots on the ground. He's seen the lives of other human beings lost, and I believe that, and I know that is important to him. But he has gotten to where that point is, and he's gotten there in a very deliberate manner in which he's gotten there. He has told his NATO partners and European Union partners, specifically NATO partners, if Russia violates your airspace, shoot it down. Shoot down that entity. He was always, and he has also suggested that it's time to plow more arms to Ukraine. But he wants to do it in a way that benefits everyone. It benefits the NATO, it benefits the European Union, it benefits our national security, and it benefits our taxpayers here too. USA selling arms to NATO and the EU, and those arms then being transferred to Ukraine. Back in February, I believe it was, when Zelensky was in the Oval Office and we had that incident that went on, I don't believe that Zelensky did have all the cards, as the president said. But during that time, Putin has tried to bluff his way during this card game, and now the Ukraine has, I believe, getting more and more of the cards there. And I think the way we got here is because of a number of different things. Number one, the most recently, is the violation of airspace of NATO and American allies. The other one is that every time the president thought he had substantive conversations with Putin, hours later he was bombing residential areas of Ukraine. And then, of course, one of the aspects we thought that would act as a little bit of a national security issue for Ukraine as a security guard would be the investment of American businesses and the mineral deals there. But some American businesses were attacked in Ukraine as well. The secondary sanctions are critical to this economic, diplomatic approach to Russia. But I think, as we pointed out, I think the president, I don't think, he is right. You cannot impose all these sanctions, secondary sanctions, on Russia while the European nations that are being affected directly and are the ones that are concerned and asking for help from the United States are funding the Russian war machine that's on their border. That has to stop. I have not seen that stop. I don't know if anybody's reported that to have stopped. Until that stops, that is the funding source that's going to lead to the demise or the advancement of Russian influence into Europe.
Governor.
I think Jesse made a real good point about them having their cake and eating it too when they start appealing to us for assistance. And I also agree with him that President Trump really doesn't want to start any prolonged engagement. I saw a documentary the other evening about the 20 years that we were in Afghanistan and how the leaders lied to the public and how the ones who were even on the ground lied to the leaders. And after the whole thing was over, no one can say we gained anything.
Well, isn't that the problem?
Well, in fairness, the reason why we didn't gain anything is because of Joe Biden's catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan.
Yes, exactly.
All right. We should still be there. We should still have Bagram Air Force Base. Afghanistan is one of, I think, one of two countries in the world that borders both China and Iran. With Bagram is only about 100 miles from the Chinese border. We would have had complete control of the skies, and we could have spied on China as much as we want. And that's actually where the Uyghurs are, where the genocide is being occurred against the Uyghurs by the Chinese in that part of China. It's where the oil is being pumped from Iran. So we gave up a lot. It was the surrender. It's how we left. I happen to believe we should still be there, but it was how we left that caused the problem. You can draw a direct line from our catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan to the invasion in Ukraine, and just like you can draw a direct line between the Obama-Biden appeasement, please, pleading of Iran and the JCPOA and October 7th, all this shows is that when America retreats, bad things fill the void. That's why America needs to project power abroad, not for anybody else, but for ourselves, to protect American national interests. Anyone on the planet that tells you that America is safer today because we left Afghanistan has no idea what they're talking about.
Well said.
Well,
absolutely.
This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, attorney, and essayist Eric Lavine, Governor David Paterson. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back for our third and final segment of this week's show in but a few moments. Please stay with us.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg,
Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia,
and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk Republican Party. With us is our co-host, Eric Lavine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. And joining us today in the studio is our good friend, my beloved colleague on Katz and Cosby.
And Mets fan.
And Mets fan, Governor David Paterson. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and let the record show that I am a Brooklyn Dodger fan, which makes me as relevant as saying I'm still a Democrat. Now,
neither exists.
That's right.
The Brooklyn Dodgers and the Democratic Party have in common that they no longer exist.
Right. You mean you're trying to tell me Duke Snyder is gone? Who knew? So, gentlemen, on a serious note, President Trump has declared Antifa to be a terrorist organization. So the question becomes how to best confront and defeat it. Now, I read a very interesting piece in John Solomon's blog today, just the news. And I've often said that the failure to understand about the extremists on both ends, the left and the right going at each other, leads to destruction of civil order and to civil war and destruction of civil values that keep us in peace. So, what are the historical analogs? Well, John Solomon in his column said Antifa, where did they get the expression? Where did they get their flags? Where did they get their symbols from? Antifa was actually created by Joseph Stalin's Soviet Russia. And they created this as a device to go after the so-called social democrats, the moderate centrists, because they believed that if there's a war between the fascists, the Nazis, led by Hitler and his group, and they went into the streets, they would win that war. So it literally was a war of left versus right, with Stalin underestimating the power of his group, or overestimating the power of his group, underestimating the power of the Nazis, and not appreciating how important it was to have the social democrats, the moderates, stay in place. By both sides going after the social democrats, they undermined the cement that keeps a civil society going. Now, I respectfully submit that historical analog is very serious, very important, and has to be considered about what's going on in the United States today. So I think Antifa is rightfully declared to be a threat to the United States of America domestically. I believe there's foreign funding for it. There's certainly domestic funding for it. They're well organized. They're well disciplined. They are not just a group of spontaneous demonstrators. They're there with a declared goal of destroying our constitutional republic. Governor, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you look long enough, there'd be some money that came in from the Soviet Union at the same time. And I think that Antifa was, I think, underestimated for a long period of time. They were almost considered to be a philosophical group for somehow, and they're everything to the contrary. So at this point, it's really rather simple. Anything that we could do, this country, our president, and anyone else, our military, if necessary, to wipe them out, would be doing the world a big favor.
Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that Antifa is a domestic terrorist organization. I believe that this most recent attack on ICE in Texas, the shooter wrote on one of the bullets. Thankfully, that didn't harm any of the ICE agents, but unfortunately killed some of the immigrants. I believe he wrote Antifa on the bullet. Look, there's no difference between extreme left and extreme right in terms of world outlook and how to deal with issues. They get violent. The only difference is right now that the left is the radical left is much larger and much more violent than the current radical right. So that's why we're seeing this explosion on the left, whether it's, BLM, whether it's Antifa, whether it's the Intifada Nazis. But there, you can use the word Nazis while trying to describe the left, because there is no difference between the two. And this, picking up on the point, Richard, you were making regarding this, Soviet Stalin creation. What's interesting is that a lot of the language that's used today by the left is a Stalin creation. When they attack Israel and they accuse it of being an apartheid regime or committing genocide, those were the terms that the Soviet Union was using during the Cold War in order to try and win over the Arab states to their side in the Arab-Israeli conflict. So words are very, very powerful. They can really communicate a lot, and they can motivate people. And we are seeing what words of violence and calls to violence can generate, what they can motivate. And that's where I think we're seeing this explosion of violence on the left, attacking ICE agents, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But, it's up to those of us in the center to eschew this to speak up against it, to tell both sides, all sides, there can be no violence. But that does not mean that it's not the left right now that is the far more violent wing of the American electorate, the American population, than the right. That's where the real danger comes right now, because the Democratic Party, I think it's a topic we're going to talk about soon, really no longer exists. It's now the Democratic Socialists of America, and there may be some vestiges of the old Democratic Party, but the way the DSA operates is it incites to violence. It describes everybody that doesn't agree with them as a Nazi, as a threat to democracy, as the threat to the it's going to create the end of the world as we know it. So it motivates people to violence, and that's what I think we're seeing.
Jesse,
I think deepest reaches my heart that designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization was a long time coming. Why it took this long, I don't know. Why presidents that preceded President Trump did not see this and recognize it and take action to keep this homeland safe. We've seen it throughout. And I've said this on a number of different occasions because Antifa always seems to be, especially from 2020 and every riot that comes forward since then, has been the source or part of the antagonists for these riots to happen. And I've said this on many occasions that there is a difference. When you have groups like Antifa and you have groups maybe like right now with the Republican Party, that in something like what happened with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you didn't see rioting, looting, the attack on police officers or law enforcement, or the attack on communities. What you saw was people gathering together, families and communities gathering together. You saw them coming together with one voice to speak about freedom and liberty, and they filled our houses of worship to great levels. That's the difference there. But more specifically, we know, and it's been known by law enforcement by multiple administrations, that Antifa is part of this. What I really am interested in is what the president said. Those sources of funding that are funding Antifa and its violent political violence and its violent actions in terms of rioting and antagonism of the community to start riots, to start attacks on ICE officers, law enforcement officers. That's what we need to do. I'm glad that this order begins the actions of spearheading the effort on the federal government to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle all illegal operations conducted by Antifa and those people, those organizations that are funding this. The president's isn't joking around or just speaking off the cuff. When you go to these riots and you see the same sign over and over again, professional signs, I know this. I know when I hold a rally for like-minded Republicans for an election, we hand out signs. They're all basically the same, made by the same printer, and you have supposedly the grassroots and communities having these same pre-printed signs. No, someone's antagonizing this. Someone is going on to, and we've seen this proven in the anti-Semitic actions taken on our college campuses. There are professional antagonizers, agitators there. We need to cut off the funding. If Soros is involved and his organization is involved and others like him or foreign governments, the swift action under law must be taken, because that's the best and first way that we're going to be able to end these type of domestic terrorist organizations. You cut off their funding, just like we do in different countries and terror organizations.
And you also prosecute them under the Civil Rights Law, which
Absolutely.
is a felony, which is a crime. You go after them they're aiding and abetting. Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. But Jesse, there is one thing. There is one caveat to what you were saying in terms of the speakers at at Charlie Kirk's memorial ceremony. Tucker Carlson took the stand, went to the podium, and spewed some of the most vile, disgusting anti-Semitic tropes.
Totally despicable.
Yeah, grotesque. I mean, if Turning Point USA is going to be taken over and filled, those shoes are going to be filled by people like Tucker Carlson, that organization is going to die. Tucker Carlson took to the stand and started talking about Christ killers. Of course, he was talking about the Jews. And his history of anti-Semitic comments is legion. He's a revisionist. He's revisionist in history. He thinks that Churchill started the war and Hitler was an innocent victim. He's a Holocaust. He puts Holocaust deniers on his show. So we have to be careful who's going to. When we talk about Charlie Kirk and what he stood for, that's one thing. But if that void is going to be filled by Tucker Carlson, then Turning Point USA is going to be no better than Antifa.
You're speaking about one person at a memorial.
But he had a very prominent role, and that was very disturbing.
It's a huge difference when you have people rioting in the streets, looting businesses, attacking individuals in law enforcement and whatnot. I mean, we could have a whole debate about Tucker Carlson. My thing here was about the average American, the people, those people who are like-minded individuals. They weren't there on the stage spewing this type of hate. What they were doing was gathering in houses of worship. They were gathering in families and communities. You know what? Every realm is going to have someone of a bad seed or whatnot. And like I said, we can talk about we can focus on Tucker Carlson, but that wasn't the focus of that memorial. I wasn't even speaking about the memorial. I'm speaking about the aftermath that happened after an issue like it happened with the George Floyd issue or with the political assassination immediately after Charlie Kirk.
As the only judge in this panel, I rule in favor of both of you. I think you're both right. Look, I used to when Tucker Carlson was on Fox, I used to watch him regularly, and he used to have a guest on the show regularly. Her name was Candace Owens. Okay, and I listened to those people, and then there came a time I stopped listening to them before Tucker was blown off Fox, and I stopped listening to him because it became clear that he was a rabid isolationist, rabid pro-Putin, a very, very dangerous threat to the survival of this country, did not understand international relations, foreign affairs, national security. And then I started listening to some more, and he's a rabid anti-Semite, anti-Zionist. And when he made that reference, I want to just clarify my good friend Eric's comment. The allegation that the Jews are responsible for killing of Christ is one of the most ridiculous propositions ever foisted on mankind. In fact, it took them a few hundred years to do it, but even the Catholic Church recognized that the people responsible for the killing of Christ were the Romans.
I think it took them about 1,600 years.
1,600 years, so a few, give or take. But the short answer is that's a defamation against the Jewish people. That's who it was. So let's be very, very clear on that. I want to say to you that Antifa is a dangerous organization and has to be confronted. I say to you that Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point, was doing very important work talking about American values and protecting America. And Eric's point is very well said. We have to make sure that it's not taken over by an extremist faction led by Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. These are dangerous people. I want to switch gears, talking about takeovers, gentlemen.
And dangerous organizations.
That's right. The Democratic Party. The Democratic Party. My party, which, of course, I am accused of not being a member of anymore.
You can't belong to something that no longer exists.
All right, Governor, I need support here. Am I still a Democrat? And is there still a party? Is it worth saving? What's going on with the Democratic Party?
Well, Your Honor, a couple hours ago before the show, believe it or not, we were actually up that early. We had a conversation about the 2016 Democratic National Convention. And in that National Convention, there was a great fear about Bernie Sanders and his ability to rally the left to make things difficult for Hillary Clinton in November. So the decision was made to let Bernie Sanders be almost like some war hero who was paraded around the convention, spoke 3 or 4 times, spoke in front of the national audience, and did, at the same time, what they feared he would do was that he did organize a number of people from the left. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is saying things that should have been challenged at that convention. He was speaking more to the hearts of people than to put on some kind of show, thinking that it would fool anybody. And inevitably, as we know, in November, he won that election away from Hillary Clinton. And it was a stunning disappointment when that actually happened. One that I don't think the Democratic Party has ever arisen from. And certainly, some of the efforts to try to put it back together have been thwarted, even coming from the White House as late as when the very end of President Obama's term. So what I would just say is that we're trying to put it together, and it's going slowly. We don't have the captains in the neighborhoods and the people who go and knock on doors like we did before, but maybe we'll find a technology that can reach people and at least present a decent alternative to what our Republican friends are presenting.
Eric.
Yeah, I would argue that there is no longer a Democratic Party. It is now the Democratic Socialists of America Party. And, Governor, to your point about Bernie Sanders at the convention, you're 100% right. However, he should never have been at that convention.
Exactly.
Well,
we all agree.
That's what Judge Weinberg was saying when we had the conversation.
The first mistake, the beginning of the end of the modern Democratic Party was allowing
him
to participate in the primaries. He was never a Democrat. He was always a socialist. He would always identify as a socialist. And now, so he lost the election. He did not win the primary. But ideologically, he owns the party. So this is Bernie Sanders' ideology.
Governor.
So, Eric, can I tell you something? When I was first in politics and Republicans were talking about myself and friends of mine, they would call us bleeding heart liberals. The fact is that the bleeding heart, that image in the Democratic Party is still there. You never really want to say something bad about another Democrat, even when the Democrat does bad things. And if that kind of conduct doesn't change, then you will be totally right, Eric.
But my point is that Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. Okay. He's a socialist.
We agree. Jesse, we have a few minutes
for me,
left.
I'm watching a Democrat civil war play out right in front of us.
No, that's not true.
This is Bernie Sanders. This is why we have Zoran Mamdani. This is why he will be the next mayor.
Absolutely. The new Democrat Socialist Party is Mamdani, and you have to understand that now endorsing a communist, socialist, anti-Semite is the new litmus test for the Democratic Party in this state. I mean, these are the individuals that we have watched. We have seen the leader of the Democratic Party, Kathy Hochul, our governor here, who was booed resoundingly, by the way. I mean, at the Ryder Cup at the Black Horse in Bethpage. That should send her a message about how she stands on Long Island.
You're assuming she's intelligent enough to receive a message.
You know what? You don't have to be that smart to realize when people are booing you. But maybe she says at least to have a reaction. Well, the reaction hopefully is going to be bounce off of her perch when the ballots are cast in 2026. But you have her endorsing Mamdani. Then you have Jay Jacobs, who won't endorse and is now under threat from the party and including the leader of that party. The Democrats are in a state here where, to go to what Governor Paterson said, that since 2016, the Democrats and what they deem a surprise, unconscionable victory by Donald Trump have never really truly gotten their footing together. It's because they have Trump delusion syndrome, TDS. They are all about Trump. If he breathes, they have to oppose it. If he cured cancer, they have to oppose it. It does not matter. They just want to oppose it. That's where they now reside in their minds. But right now, if you look at the state of the Democratic Party, and you've got to look at New York City. It's the biggest election in the state here, outside throughout the state, and you have a communist socialist who is anti-Semitic in Mamdani, who wants to give $30 minimum wage, government-run grocery stores, government-run businesses, major tax hike, is for a global intifada. And then the other choice, really, is Andrew Cuomo. No disrespect to your running mate, Governor, but he's a disgraced governor that was forced to resign for his policies that killed senior citizens in nursing homes. He failed to use resources like the Mercy hospital ship that was given to him by President Trump. But he used his staff and state resources to ghostwrite a book. And, of course, he had to resign under disgrace for sexual harassment. That's the state of the Democratic Party. And that's in a civil war.
Don't forget bail reform. Don't forget bail reform.
I haven't even gotten to – there's so much. We haven't gotten to the revolving door justice system, which coddles criminals and handcuffs cops, judges, and prosecutors like cashless bail, and, of course, the Clean Slate Act, which means you just wipe away Wipe away everyone's criminal record after a short amount of time. So we put them back on the street so no one knows that they committed a crime.
This is why we miss Governor Paterson.
That's right. We want Governor Paterson back, but we're going to give the governor the final word on this week's Let the Record Show.
Well, in addition to the fact that I spent about $2 million to clear myself from an investigation that was instituted by the Attorney General of the state of New York at the time.
And who is he, by the way?
I'll get to his name in a minute. He has gotten $48 million in legal assistance over all these different cases over this particular time, and not once has said, well, while I'm taking this, we should give Governor Paterson back his measly $2 million that he spent in 2010.
Well, end on that very positive note.
For those of you who don't know, that Attorney General was
Andrew
Cuomo.
Yes.
A real quality human being.
Listen,
there you go.
and as I often say, this mayor election is a Hobson's choice, and regrettably, pick your Hobson as long as it's not Mondami. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine, Governor David Paterson, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We want to thank you for listening. And as always, God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America. Look forward to being with you again next week on Let the Record Show.
Thanks for listening to Let the Record Show with Judge Weinberg, Chairman Jesse Garcia, and Eric Lavine. You can hear Let the Record Show Sunday mornings at 6. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
This Sunday is the Tunnel to Towers Foundation Walk Run, and our team is in need of your support. Right now, every dollar counts. The WABC hosts must all rally their loyal audience to participate. Go to WABCRadio.com/walk and help your favorite hosts right here at WABC and support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Go to WABCRadio.com/walk. Help WABC raise money for the amazing Tunnel to Towers Foundation Walk Run. Go to WABCRadio.com/walk.